Hi, this is Steve on the Guru Brew. Today we're going to be doing a two-parter of a video series. The first part will be how to identify what parts are in a computer and what parts make up a total computer. And then the second part of the video, we will take all these parts and put it inside an actual case and build the computer. This is not rocket science, it's nothing hard to do, it's just a matter of knowing the steps and knowing what parts to use. So if you're ready to begin to building your own computer, stay tuned. I have all the parts on this table that we will be using to build our learning computer with. This is actually an HP computer that we're using for the actual case. The parts themselves aren't necessarily for an HP, but the case is a Pavilion A1320Y, and it has the media center front. I have the parts all off it right now, but they're all right here. And this first video, we will talk about the parts that we will be putting in this case and what each one does and where it goes and how it works. And then on the second video that will be coming up after this one, we will actually put the parts together and make a working computer. So we're going to grab one part at a time and talk about it. So the first up part that we will talk about is the case. Well, here's the main chassis to the case, and as you can see, there's not many parts in it. Really, the only part that is in it right now is the front plug, the front power switch, and the hard drive indicator as well as the power indicator. That's here. And other than that, this case is completely empty. And this is a regular full-size tower, and it takes a standard power supply, which would go here, and all the connectors coming out of the back here for the motherboard. We'll talk more about that later, as well as expansion ports here on the back. Each one of these plates come out. We're going to use this grill here and add an external fan, so this will help keep this machine cool. That's all there is to the chassis, the case if you will. But there are some other parts to it. The front cover, which is here. And this front cover was made for this chassis, and it just snaps on. In addition to this cover, HP has what they like to call the media center, and this is part of the media center here. And the media center is basically just a smart card all-purpose reader. It also has a 2.0 USB port there and a memory stick slot, and the memory stick is actually an HP product, so it's something that they tried to get popular. I think they've done away with memory sticks now, maybe not, but you know, you can still use the compact flash 1 and 2 as well as the MMC and SD cards there. And this is designed to plug into their motherboard, but it is just a USB 2.0 plug there on the end. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I just wanted you to be aware that unless you want a big hole in the front of your case here, you can always cover it up with this door if you want to. You will need the media center portion with it, so it at least covers up this hole. And you can see that this still won't cover the hole. There's one more part to it, and it is this. And this part is designed to take the audio connections as well as 2 spare USBs and a 1394 and bring them up to the front as well. And this all plugs into the motherboard through these cables, and most of the cables are either just a regular audio cable or a USB 2.0 cable. There's two of those on there, as you can see. So this is designed to go here in this slot, and I have all the parts for that, and the card reader is designed to go here, and that's how we're going to work it. I'm going to put one optical drive here in the top, and then the second bay will just be empty. There's not much more to say about the case. The only other thing that I might say about the case is here's the cover. It's just a typical slide type cover. Any case that is of normal size, full size tower case could be used for this project. I just happen to have this one, and it's the one we're going to use. You may or may not have features like I have on the front, such as these audio connections, but that really doesn't matter. You just leave that part off. So that covers the case. Next up will be the motherboard. This motherboard will fit nicely in the full-size HP case that we just looked at. This is a pretty typical motherboard. It's built for a Pentium 4 type chip, and it's of normal size and normal pin configuration. It has SATA connections as well as IDE and floppy. It has all the header pins, which are here for the power for the front side to control the power switch, the lights, and the HD, the hard drive activity. These two are for the USB 2.0. That will come in handy. Even though there's USBs here on the back, there's actually 4 of them. It's nice to have additional USBs on the motherboard because we can plug in these additional card readers like I just showed you a minute ago. This sort of thing here, there's 2 of them on there. By simply plugging in this USB connector, we can bring that USB up to the front of the case or the rear, depending on the configuration. In this situation, it's in the front. So with this motherboard, we have the capability to either use IDE with a ribbon cable, which is here, these type of ribbon cables, and we can run a IDE hard drive, an optical drive, such as these, or we can run the SATA, and there's 4 SATA ports here that you can see. The memory slots, there's 2 of them that are available here, are for the PC2 type memory RAM that can fit in here. That's pretty standard. And the plug, which is right here, is for the power supply, and that is of generic quality and type. Any modern power supply has I think it's 22 connections. Now if you notice on this power supply, when this fits in here, there's actually 4 pins that are left over, and those 4 pins bring extra power to the motherboard, and you can actually leave the power off on those pins and just push this up to the top and leave the power off on those 4 pins. That's perfectly acceptable, but you might find that other power supplies do include those 4 pins, and either way it will work. There's the socket for the processor there, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And here's the back, and you can see that we have a parallel port for a printer. Here's PS2 connections for a keyboard and a mouse. You have your VGA connector here. Here's the Ethernet port here. There's 4 USB ports, a 1394 port here. And then these are all the audio connections for out, in, headphone, that sort of thing, line in. So this is a pretty standard motherboard, and you'll also notice that most motherboards come with a bolt pattern on them that will fit many different types of cases, and this is, you know, actually a pretty standard bolt pattern. And you can see on the back of this it has an X brace to hold the heat sink in place. So we will come back to the motherboard when we install it. Next up, we're going to talk about the fans. Okay, we're going to take a look at cooling here for just a minute. This is the heat sink that belongs on top of the processor, and we'll get into how to mount that here in a little bit, but there is the actual piece of aluminum. It's just a big piece of aluminum that is cut into fins, and then typically a fan will sit on top of it like this one, and the air will be pushed down into the fins itself, and that's how that works, like that. And then I said before that the case, let me grab that, the case has this ventilation hole here, and that will be an added bonus to cooling off the processor and everything else. So we're going to mount this fan in here, and we're going to bring in fresh air from the outside, point it into the case. So that covers our fan selection. Next up, we're going to talk about optical drives. We'll throw the power supply in there too. Okay, so there's nothing really special about this. This is a read-writable compact disc, a CD, and if you look at the back of it, it is set up for IDE, which is these ribbon cables. Something to remember on these ribbon cables, there's a red line that goes here, and if you always keep the red line towards the power connector, this 4-pin plug is the power connector. If you always keep the red line towards that, you'll always get these IDEs on there correctly, just like that. It doesn't go like this. You can see there's a key that fits up into here to make sure that you put it on right. But when you have your hands down in a dark case and you're just trying to do some quick swapping, it's a good thing to remember about this red line. Something else, I don't know if you know about IDEs, that I thought I'd bring it up with, is this pin configuration here. There are 6 pins, and there's generally one jumper that's made out of plastic that will short 2 of these pins together. And generally on the case, there'll be a little picture of the pin configuration to tell you what pin does what. And I don't know if this is going to pick up very well, but here on this case it tells you, like if I have these first 2 pins shorted, that means that it's set up for cable select, and that's generally the one that you use. If you have the middle one together, that'll set up for slave, and slave is generally a secondary hard drive that you would put in. And then the third jumper would be set for master, so like if you wanted this to be number 1, the master. And the IDE hard drives work exactly the same way. They also have this block that controls how the drive is written, and there's also a little picture here that shows you how to put the jumper on various pins if you want it to be a slave, a master, or cable select. I will tell you that for most jobs, as long as you follow the ribbon cable as far as the slave master on a ribbon cable, you can always just generally put it on cable select and everything will be fine. On SATA drives, this is not an issue and you don't have this problem, but we're going to be using IDE drives in this particular project, so that's why I'm bringing them up. Okay, now let's bring our attention to the power supply for this project. This is just a stock power supply. The main thing about the power supply is you make sure that number one, this connection, the P1 connection, will fit on the motherboard. Here's our motherboard here, and I had talked about the connections, about the 2 extra pins here. That's just fine for that kind of connection. So we want to make sure that the P1 connector works on the motherboard, and also that you have enough connectors for your various devices. Now, these type of connectors here are for the IDE drives for the power, and there's also another simple technique to remember how these power connectors go on these pins. If you remember that the red wire here on the wire always goes towards the ribbon cable, you'll always know which way this wire goes on. And then remember the trick I told you about the ribbon cable. Always make sure that the red wire goes towards the ribbon cable. So basically it's red to red here in the center, and there's the little trick for that. So, you know, on this project I'm using a hard drive, which is IDE. I'm using this optical CD rewriter, which is also IDE. So I will need 2 IDE cables. Now this power supply has many IDE power connectors, so that's not a problem, but I needed at least 2, and I checked this one. This one works with my motherboard, and then all the rest of these except for this one aren't needed. Now this is what I call a P4 connector. It's a 4-pin connector that is designed to take power and put it on your motherboard, and most modern motherboards are going to require this, and the connector for it is located right here. And so you want to make sure that you have a P4 connector on your power supply that will fit right there if your motherboard requires it. Okay, so that wraps up the optical drive, the hard drive, and the power supply. The only thing left as far as parts go to start putting these all together and actually make a computer are basically a memory module, and here's a memory module here. This happens to be 1 gig, and you have to pair your memory modules according to what you have for a motherboard. And so you would have to physically look up what this motherboard calls for. You could just Google the serial number of this board, and it would tell you what type of memory to purchase. So you're going to need at least 1 memory module. Okay, the only other part that is really needed to build a computer is the processor, and that is just like the memory. It must be purchased for your particular motherboard. So you want to look up the make and model of this motherboard and make sure that the actual physical processor will fit and be the correct size. And all this information is available on the website just by Googling the numbers. This happens to be a Pentium 4 3 gigahertz processor, and I'll show you how to install that here once we get building it in the next video. I think I've gone through all the parts except for maybe some various screws. That pretty much covers all the parts that it will take to put this computer together. I hope that you had learned something on this first edition. I know it's more for beginners, but even if you're a seasoned vet, maybe you can learn something too about the ID stripes and that sort of thing. So now that we've talked about all these parts that will go inside the computer, the next video in our series will be taking all these parts and putting it inside that HP case and make it an actual computer that will work. So next time when I see you, we'll get the screwdriver out and we'll start putting parts in. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, this is Steve. Thanks for watching. Hey, don't forget to subscribe if you like this video, and be sure to rate and comment. See ya.